Today on New Mexico Rising, we talk to Jay Block, Sandoval County Commissioner, retired Air Force veteran, and one of the first GOP candidates to throw his hat in the ring to run for governor in 2022. We will talk to him about all things New Mexico and how his candidacy will help New Mexico rise. Stay tuned. And welcome to another edition of New Mexico Rising. Do not adjust your cameras and streams and feeds. It is I, Thaddeus Preston. Sean Bradley Whitman will not be with us this week. He's taking the week off, but we have someone pinch hitting who is going to help us usher in this edition. You may know him as a New Mexican on YouTube, and he's been good friend of the show, good friend of the network, good friend around New Mexico Rising, and of course our other endeavors. A New Mexican, aka Nick Driver, welcome again to the show. Welcome to the show for the first time, actually, as my guest host for today. Introduce yourself to the fam. Who are you?
Oh, thank you for having me today. I'm Nick Driver, and as he said, I'm a New Mexican. You can find me on YouTube, and basically, I'm just someone who likes to give my opinion on the counterpoints of what the news is spilling out in the mainstream.
Yeah, and thank God for that. We need more kind of citizen skeptics, citizen journalists talking about these issues, particularly about our state, because I know we've been kind of talking and really kind of battling out on a national stage for the last God, it feels like 5 years now. But the reason why we do New Mexico Rising and basically bring on people like yourself, we want to know what's going on here, because the battle unfortunately starts at home. And allow me a point of privilege to rant a little bit about something else that's been going on near home. So for those of you who don't know, I live in Los Lunas. Come at me if you must. But so I had the privilege of finally seeing my last child graduate from Los Lunas High School last weekend, and proud papa. It's good to see your kids accomplish stuff. Absolutely. But subsequently, during the week, the Los Lunas School Board, all of those guys were like suspended, like suddenly. I found this shocking because Eloy Garon, who someone I actually know, who I've worked with at the labs, and who's kind of a local guy, is caught up in this. And what the New Mexico Public Education Department says is that it had credible evidence that violations had taken place among one or more of the board members. It was very nebulous in how they described this. But some of the areas of concern that they were talking about is kind of, not to, talk down the state, but it's kind of your run-of-the-mill corruption scandal, I guess. Knowingly misrepresenting information in public meetings, violating Open Meetings Act by having rolling quorums, directly asking and demanding vendors to redo parts of contracts, soliciting bids, providing confidential bids to potential vendors, addressing a district employee in an inappropriate and threatening manner, inducing employees to lie about supervisors. From public access concerns to procurement concerns to ethical concerns, I just found this odd, and to suspend the entire school board. And it's strange. It's strange, being that I had a personal relationship with one of the board members, not like close, but this is the guy that certified the class of 2021 at Los Lunas High School. What happened? I don't know, Nick. What do you think?
Honestly, I'm I'm not going to say too much because I don't know enough about it. I'm a guy that likes to look at facts, and right now, where are the facts? I haven't seen them. They're not releasing them. They're just saying and throwing out accusations right now. So until the facts come out, I really don't have a strong opinion. But it is kind of awkward that they did suspend all of them at once without really any replacement plan, or did they have a replacement plan? That's the question.
Right. Yeah. No. And I'm with you. I'm kind of wanting to wait and see. I don't. Maybe it's because I have maybe a antagonistic, I don't know, relationship with New Mexico Public Education Department in the sense that like this just seems strange to me. It just kind of came out of the blue. You suspended everyone without implicating anyone in particular, and you know these are just things that I ask questions about. It's nothing wrong with asking questions about it. It's just I find it very, very strange indeed. All right. Well, anyway, now that I've kind of ranted about that and stuff like that, we got to move on to our guest here. It is J.C. Block. He has announced his candidacy. He's the first GOP candidate that has announced his candidacy to run for governor. Retired Lieutenant Colonel, Sandoval County Commissioner, District 2. J.C. Block. Colonel Block, welcome to New Mexico Rising.
Hey, thank you. Jay is fine.
Jay, no problem. No. Old habits die hard for an Air Force guy like myself. So
yeah,
sorry, Jay.
And thank you, and thank you, Thaddeus, for your service as well. I think we both served in some similar areas in Germany, and I assume Hill Air Force Base in Utah. I lived up there for a little bit too.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We have, you have a tendency to go. We've been around the block quite a few times. I didn't do the 20 years. I just did about 11.
You served.
Yeah, we served at the height of the craziness, and we've been to not only those parts of the world that you went to, and of course I went to the Middle East as well. I'm pretty sure you went to the Middle East. I went to the Balkans. Yeah, man. So it's really good to see that someone who served is actually now getting out and doing public service, particularly, political office and stuff like that. And let me also, before you get started, say thank you for fighting the fight when it came to right to work, when it came to also the Second Amendment sanctuary county stuff. I mean, we're going to need to fight those battles like county by county, city by city, state by state. And so we appreciate your efforts on that stuff.
Yeah, I'd be more than willing to talk about that a little later here during the show. But I also want to say thank you to Nick. I really like your shirt.
Thank you. My wife is the one who bought it for me. So,
did she buy that for you?
Absolutely, she's got to.
Good
Lets
man.
Everybody know.
Yeah, just to keep us in check. Just always to keep us in check, man. So hey, let's just talk about. What do you do on the county commission? I mean, who is J.C. Block, and why do you think you should be the next governor of New Mexico?
Well, a little bit about my background. I was born in New Hampshire, in Manchester, New Hampshire, born and raised there. I haven't been back to New Hampshire since I graduated from high school in 1989, basically, to live permanently. I went off to college in North Dakota, at North Dakota State University in Fargo. Graduated there, got a commission in the Air Force. I went down the nuclear track as an officer, as a ICBM launch officer, one of the guys sitting underground waiting to launch Minuteman III missiles, which you can see right over my shoulder, over there, right over my shoulder. I did an ICBM maintenance tour, a couple tours up at Minot Air Force Base, Malmstrom Air Force Base, missile work over at Hill Air Force Base, where you and I were. And then did some time in the Pentagon as a nuclear policy officer. Also was twice commanded on foreign soil, serving our country as a senior Air Force officer over on a base in the Netherlands and on an island, a British island in the South Atlantic called Ascension Island. Like you deployed, I deployed as well. I volunteered to go to Afghanistan in 2005, 2006, which was probably the most rewarding time, I would say, in my 21 years as an officer, 4 years as an enlisted guy in the Guard and Reserve. And I retired. I moved here in 2015 from Germany. I was at Spangdahlem, Germany, while you were over at Ramstein, right down the road, about an hour and 15 minutes. And retired out of Kirtland Air Force Base doing nuclear surety, and got a job in private industry, consulting, doing as a nuclear weapons, nuclear operations consultant, and decided to continue to serve. And I moved up here to Rio Rancho because the schools were good. It was a beautiful community, and decided to serve my community by running for county commission. This particular district, like you said, District 2 is a blue district. I took on an incumbent in 2016 as a conservative, an incumbent who was well known, well liked, but we were able to work hard and get our message out and win the race. And I was reelected in 2020 despite being outspent by my opponent and by PAC money that came after me with television commercials. First time ever, by the way, Sandoval County, they ran television commercials against the county commissioner, basically because of my work that you talked about with right to work, sanctuary county rather, and Second Amendment. But, we also did a lot of economic development up here by reducing unemployment by a third. And I'm very proud of my district and the people here and the businesses and the first responders, because my commission district is the only one in the state that can brag, and my constituents should brag, about Rio Rancho being the best place to live and Corrales being the safest place to live. So I was asked to run for other offices. Previously, I said no. I really loved being a county commissioner. I love working the local issues. And I'd like to use some of that model that we've used in Sandoval County statewide, and going around the state for the past few months as a potential candidate, and then as an announced candidate back in April. I hear a lot of the same things that people are concerned about in New Mexico under this governor, who's probably the worst governor in the history of the state and the most corrupt governor that we've ever had in New Mexico, and one of the worst governors in the country. So I'm going to fight. We need conservative candidates that are willing to fight. We don't need spineless candidates who aren't willing to fight and do the work. And I'm excited about this campaign. It's going to be a fight. And I know the other side's going to do everything they can to play identity politics, to do all the dirty tricks that they're known for doing. And I look forward to having hopefully a real debate with the person who's the governor now.
Well, that's going to be good. We definitely need that competition, or that other view coming up on the side, because you're right. The commercials and stuff is just crazy. All you get to see is one side of the factor most of the time, and that's why we exist. We exist to show the other side.
I appreciate that.
Right. So based on some of the discussions you've been having with your tour around the state, give us some specifics. What are the people talking to you about since you've been doing your state tour? What big issues are they bringing up to you?
So it's crime related to the southern border. It's education related to how we're 50th in the nation in education. It's about economic development. It's also about bringing integrity back to the office, somebody who actually cares for the people instead of the special interest, somebody who is not consumed with power. And I believe that the governor should be held accountable for many, many things. These people around New Mexico, the common denominator is they feel helpless, they feel silenced, they feel canceled. A lot of people are depressed. I just saw a stat come out today. I don't know if you saw it or not, but drug overdoses in New Mexico are up 25% over the past year. And, when you shut down the state, a lot of bad things happen in relation to losing kids. How many suicides have we had with our young people now? How many mental health issues have we had? This governor just doesn't listen. She doesn't listen to the average New Mexican. She listens to whoever is lining her pockets or her campaign. And New Mexico wants to change. So change is coming. And our campaign is not a campaign about one party. It's a campaign about a movement across New Mexico to take the government back, to be held accountable, to be transparent, because this governor has not been very transparent with IPRA requests from, there's a group out there called Stop MLG from a guy named Brett Kokonitis, who has filed IPRAs, and the governor refuses to answer them. I sponsored and passed the first ever ethics ordinance in Sandoval County. I think it's extremely important that we have transparency in government, and you must answer to the people when you have VIPA requests. And this governor is, she likes to hide a lot of things, and she likes to break her own COVID rules as well. So all that's going to be exposed, and we look forward to debating her on her poor performance as governor. I would argue that if she was a commander in the military, she'd be relieved for her poor performance and her ethics violations and her scandals.
That's agreeable. On that same note, so I know that you're running with the factor that you're going to put the limit on government power, and with the history of corruption in our governors, how can we put our trust in you that the corruption isn't going to continue and that this limited power is going to go through?
Well, I talk about, if you're familiar, Nick, with HJR 6. Are you familiar with that bill by chance?
Not too much, if you want to go ahead and explain a little bit.
Yeah, so this is a House Joint Resolution that was passed during the previous session here a few months ago. And it was actually sponsored by a Democrat, a close ally of the governor, a guy named State Representative Damon Ely, who lives in Corrales. Now, Representative Ely and I have some opposing political views by far. But this bill that he sponsored was to curb the governor's power during an emergency like the pandemic here, where the governor she can declare an emergency but has to go back to the legislature to expand her powers. That passed the House on a huge bipartisan majority. It went over to the Senate, and it died in the Senate because the governor talked to the Senate Majority Leader Peter Wirth, and she told him, "I will veto that bill. Don't even put it on the Senate floor." It's one of my policy initiatives. I want that bill to go back when I'm governor. I want that bill to go back to the House, pass, go to the Senate, pass, and I will sign that. I don't believe that we need a strong executive where the power is invested in one person who is really controlling our lives and making all these decisions for us, whether it's, when we can go to church, how we can go to church, when we can open our business, where we can eat, when our businesses can be open, when they can be closed, when you can go to the doctor, what appointments you can get and can't get. That's not what this country was made of. We're supposed to be a free country. This is a constitutional republic, and one person having this much power is dangerous, and I don't want that power. That power belongs to the people, and you have to work with the legislature, and I'm more than willing to do that.
I like that.
Yeah, that's definitely been my big bugaboo for the last year and a half. I mean, on one of my previous podcasts and stuff, we did have this discussion with some of the policy experts who in New Mexico, and basically what we didn't realize when we gave these executive powers in the 90s and early 2000s was the fact that there might come a time where someone will abuse it, and no year has been a perfect example of that abuse has been 2020. This isn't the only state where the governor went crazy and stuff like that. A quick question though, during the COVID-19 outbreak and pandemic and the subsequent emergency health order lockdowns, what did Sandoval County do right? What did it do wrong? I mean, did you guys stay locked down for an absorbent period of time? Did you guys have the power to push back against Santa Fe and stuff like that? What did you guys do in Sandoval County?
Well, again, as I was saying, the power was invested in one person. And, when President Trump acted in January of 2020 with curtailing travel between China, Europe, and the United States, the governor did not act for another 6 weeks later when she shut the state down for what she said was going to be 2 weeks. The problem with what the governor did, well, she didn't have any strategic vision on what that meant and the effects of that. For instance, she did that on one day, one afternoon, and said, "Hey, we're shutting down the next day for 2 weeks." She never coordinated with any local officials or municipalities on how that would affect how that blanket policy would affect municipalities and counties. You know this better than I do, Thaddeus or Nick, that we had many cities and towns and counties that didn't have any COVID cases for weeks or months. And yet their economies were destroyed. Their schools were shut down. What we did in May of 2020, I believe, was we passed a resolution asking for small businesses to be treated the same as large businesses. And the governor actually agreed with that finally. In fact, right the day after I announced, this is how much of a threat our movement, our campaign is, the Democratic Governors Association and the state Democratic Party came out on a hit piece on me saying I wanted to do unsafe opening. All we were asking for is for everybody to be treated the same way that big business is treated. In fact, when she shut down all these non-essential businesses, we all know, she got her jewelry from a non-essential business she shut down, but the film industry was still allowed to film here. And that's because they support her. They support her campaign. So, she's just corrupt to the core. She doesn't really have a clue what it means to lead. She doesn't understand how you lead and you negotiate and you collaborate with partners around the state. It's either her way or the highway, and she's just there's corruption to the core up there in Santa Fe, and it needs to be cleaned out.
No, that's right. I mean, Army of the Dead, the one that's huge right now, was shot here in New Mexico during this pandemic, and that's like my biggest argument right now is everyone's promoting this. And it's like you guys are totally ignoring the fact that us New Mexicans were locked at home and weren't allowed to go to work or to school or to shop but they're out there filming these movies that they're promoting like crazy. It was just a ridiculous thought. But yeah, there was definitely too much power given to Michelle this last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And, she's got now, we're seeing scandal after scandal after scandal happen on her watch. You're seeing how the state, if you look at the U.S. News and World Report on where it ranks New Mexico overall, 48th in the nation. It has all these different categories. We are at the bottom or near the bottom when it comes to, opportunities, education, infrastructure, healthcare. There are so many areas that this governor has just screwed our state up with. It's ridiculous. And it's a big hole. And I'll be honest with you, it's going to take more than 2 terms of my administration to fix this place. It's going to take a good 10 to 20 years to get New Mexico competitive with the other states, because you have to change education. You have to start supporting law enforcement. You have to change the tax code to grow private industry jobs here instead of just growing government as she has done. So there's a lot of things that we're going to do, and we're going to have a lot of collaboration, and we're going to have task forces because I want to hear what the people have to say. I'm not going to dictate to them the solution that they're going to have to live with. And that's the problem. She's just shoved so much stuff down our throats, basically saying, accept it and you're going to like it. That's not what leadership is.
No.
Another thing I like about your platform is you are definitely one who understands, based on the latest census data, that we're becoming a older retiree destination. And the fact that Social Security benefits and pension benefits and stuff are taxed here. And I don't know what other states.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
Yeah. It's crazy, right? Because if the census points to the fact that our population is going to skew older because snowbirds are going to start coming here and retiring, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but if we're gonna compete with Arizona, if we're gonna compete with Nevada, and we're going to bring in, an older crowd, a more wealthier crowd, right? People who are typical retirees are much wealthier, and brings more people in to kind of contribute more to the tax base, maybe it's more to community involvement. Then, yeah, one of the key things we're going to have to do is we're going to have to stop throwing money at Hollywood, stop throwing money at random industries, and maybe start kind of enticing veterans, retirees to come to the state. And yeah, and the fact that it's taxed, I didn't know that, and I think it's ridiculous.
Well, let me just attack that in 2 ways here. First is education. It's amazing. The lottery scholarship, it's really a great thing, but it's pretty, I don't understand why a state would subsidize our kids' education to let them leave the state, because there's no opportunity here. So here we are paying for our kids to go to college, and then they're leaving the state. Second, on what you talked about, is one of the reasons why right to work was very popular around the state, even with Democrats, is because people knew and understood the states around us are all right to work. They all have higher wages. They have higher union membership, by the way. They have lower poverty and lower unemployment. And yet you see New Mexico as an island of poverty, and people don't want to come here because there's so many other issues going on with New Mexico. In relation to your question on taxing Social Security benefits, that is one of my policy initiatives, that I will have a priority not to tax our Social Security benefits. The governor's priority was to bring back a special legislation session so we could have legal drugs with cannabis. That was her big thing. That's her priority, is to get high. That's not one of my priorities in a block administration. The average New Mexican who's retired pays roughly about $600 in state taxes of their Social Security income. I want to return that back to our retirees to help keep them here. Same thing with our veterans, Thaddeus. We tax veteran pensions. We want to keep veterans here. We want to keep our seniors here. Our veterans who retire here or separate from the military here are highly skilled, and we want them to be here. But there's got to be jobs here, and there's got to be incentives for them. And one of those incentives is not taxing their pensions. When it comes to our first responders, this governor treats them horrible, just horrible. I've talked to so many first responders who want to retire here, but they can't because they can't afford it. There's a couple things I want to do for our first responders. First is our police officers. It was a huge mistake to bump up their time, their eligibility time to retire to 25 years from 20 years. I want to bring that back down to 20 years. And I want to do that because I firmly believe that police officers across the state, they wake up every single day and they're going into a combat environment. They're one of the most scrutinized professions in the country today. And a lot of people don't respect them like the governor. They're under a lot of pressure. They have a lot of, police officers being under that stress, like you and I have been in the military in a combat environment. That's every day for 25 years. When our first responders retire, I want to give them a break and say thank you. And I want to reduce their property taxes. If they retire here in New Mexico and they're retired New Mexican first responders, I want to reduce their property taxes by 50 to 75% for them and their family, because that will either help them keep their home or buy a home. And you know this as well as I do, after 20 to 25 years of being a first responder, PTSD is a huge issue. A lot of us veterans have had issues with PTSD being deployed one time or multiple times over to a combat AOR. And so I think that's important to show our support to our first responders, because too many of them leave.
I agree. I mean, that's nice. I like the fact that you want to get those taxes taken care of for the older population and our veterans and stuff. I'm a military brat myself. Father's retired lieutenant colonel, mom's a retired lieutenant colonel. And so, it's definitely going to help them stick around. They retired up here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And yeah, so that's always going to help my family out, which I'm not trying to say it's just those military families that are going to be helped out, but it's definitely going to allow me to see them more, because they're not going to move to Florida like his dad did when he retired. Right. So keeping my parents around is definitely something I'm all for. But on that same note, what do we have planned for people like me who aren't military or aren't relying on social?
Well, I'm sorry, the cat just jumped up. Get down.
That's what cats do. I got two of them.
I have two cats as well, and my allergies get a little crazy. The one thing about helping our veterans out and our retirees who are on Social Security and our first responders is we're putting money back into their pockets so they can drive the economy. Not instead of bringing that money up to Santa Fe where it's probably going to get wasted. So, that's really important to me, is putting money back into the people's pockets so they can choose how they spend that money. And I'm a firm believer in, it's a free market economy and it should be driven that way. In relation to what you're saying for young people, I think it goes to education, and there's got to be a collaboration and a partnership between education and private industry. Right now, this is why I favor school choice. One of the most important decisions a parent makes or parents make for their children is where they can go to school. And right now, under this governor, you are forced to go to school based on you're forced to go to a certain school based on your zip code. And it's really caused a lot of economic segregation in my mind. We used to have segregation in this country from Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896, and it was finally overturned in 1954 versus Brown versus Board of Education, Topeka. But we have segregation now, and it's called economic segregation. Why can't parents choose where their kids can go to school? Why can't the state provide them a voucher if they want to send their kids to a private school or a charter school or a religious school? America was built on competition, and I firmly believe public schools need to compete with private schools, because you're going to create better teachers and you're going to have better students, and we're going to get a better product out of our education system here in New Mexico. But you also have to have the economic environment that helps stimulate private industry and growth. Prime example is like we just saw a few months ago, about 2-3 months ago, with Intel. Intel invested $20 billion right next door to Arizona, 15,000 jobs. Instead, we're more concerned about attracting the cannabis industry. The priorities are just completely wrong. So we need to redo our tax code. I would say if you look at Jason Harper, what he passed in the House for a tax code, that's probably the baseline of what I would propose and tweak and work with the legislature to make this place more business friendly. Because right now it's not. We're a Passover state. Jobs pass over New Mexico and go other places. And unfortunately, that's where our kids go. They go to other places.
I'm glad you brought.
I'm not familiar with that legislation. Yeah, no, but I'm not familiar with that legislation. Does that kill the GRT? Does that kill the GRT? Dead?
So Jason Harper redid this 400-page tax code. He's got a PhD in chemical engineering. He's a state rep up here in Rio Rancho. Brought numerous people together and worked this tax bill out, and it passed almost unanimously in the House and went to the Senate and died, unfortunately. I think I've already have contacted Jason about putting together an economic tax plan for my platform, and his proposal is one I'm going to look at seriously, and I look forward to actually making that public here, because what the governor is just status quo, and that's just not working for us.
Like I said about school choice, I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm a father of 2 young elementary students, and this pandemic has made me want to support school choice more than anything. I was already towards it before the pandemic, but this pandemic has cost me a lot of money because of school choice and the way they handled our public education during this pandemic. So I'm a big supporter of school choice.
The government does not give you the flexibility. And the government is also controlled by, teachers unions are heavily influencing the government and the school boards. And I think parents deserve to have the choice and the flexibility and various options on their children's education. We need to focus more, especially here in New Mexico. When you look at the amount of talent and opportunity we have in New Mexico, nobody else can compete with the corridor that we have from Los Alamos National Labs to come down here to Albuquerque. We have the flagship university, University of New Mexico, with a law school and a med school, a huge engineering department. You have Kirtland Air Force Base with numerous mission partners, Sandia National Lab. You go an hour south, you have Socorro. New Mexico Tech, I would argue, is probably one of the best engineering schools in the country, and probably the best engineering school that produces petroleum engineers who, by the way, leave New Mexico. Then you go further south and you have White Sands National Missile Range. You have Las Cruces with New Mexico State, and then you have Holloman Air Force Base down there. And then right near there, you have a huge training ground that is part of the Army base in El Paso. But yet we seem to just keep losing and not taking advantage of what we have here. And, when parents, I think parents feel disenfranchised because they don't have any options. They have no control over their children's education future. I think you're right, Nick. Right now is the time to really push school choice. And we what's wrong with competition? I don't understand that. I mean, this is one of the worst education systems in the country, and yet the governor doesn't want to improve it and has done nothing to improve it, but it's actually been worse. And you look at what has happened to our students who have been online, especially in the rural areas, it's just been a complete tragedy for New Mexico students being left behind, when the private schools, by the way, Nick, have been going to school since the fall, and the public students have been staying home online and falling further behind.
Yeah, I put my kids in private school this pandemic, and it was a hefty chunk out of our pocket. And thankfully, I have 2 retired parents who still work. So thankfully, they were able to help us out with this. But not everybody's as fortunate as I am. So it's always, I want to help everybody and not just things that help me, because I am a blessed person, and I can't share my wealth or my family's wealth with everybody, but we do pay taxes. So why can't we use that to help bless everybody in our state?
And especially the lower middle, the lower income folks who are, single parent, even 2-parent households. Schools have got to compete, and they got to be better, and they should be competing for students. And right now, there's no incentive for schools to compete for students. There really isn't. I mean, these poor kids are locked into a failing system. And what are you going to get when you keep putting kids into a failing system? You're going to get problems on the output for some of these kids, and we're going to have to pay for that.
Yeah, indicative of that fact that my early rant is, this issue down here where I live in Valencia County with the school board. I mean, I don't know if that's indicative of just the overall rot within the system from the county on up to the New Mexico Public Education Department or not, but it doesn't seem to me that it was a knife fight just to get schools open just in time for them to take their standardized testing so they could get their money, right? That's what caused them, particularly APS, the largest and most lucrative school system. That's what caused them to get off the couch and be like, okay, we can do in-person sometime. They don't understand the destruction that they have caused. The 100+ days of instruction that went away. The fact that your kids just vanished off of the rolls when it came to attendance. The fact that that will have long-term effects going forward. And, I'm glad I don't have kids in the system anymore, but I feel sorry for younger nieces, nephews, and grandchildren that inevitably will have to go through this system.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. You're going to see some ongoing effects for some time of what this governor and other leaders have done to our students, and it's just wrong. I mean, I feel so bad for some of these parents. I remember campaigning up here in Rio Rancho, and I knocked on the door of an apartment complex, and I was a single mother who had 4 kids, all in the Rio Rancho school system. And all 4 kids were online, obviously, and she was having, even here in the in the urban area, the bandwidth here for her kids was not there. And like you said, when you see 12,000 kids fall off, like that story we saw from the Journal out of Albuquerque, where'd they go? We need to focus on in-person learning. We need to focus, as I talked about what we have here to offer with the technical and engineering in science and math communities here. STEM is critical for science, technology, engineering, and math. We have to focus on that, but we also have to focus on the trades. I mean, electricians, plumbers, auto mechanics, blue collar jobs. By the way, we need to teach civics and how great this country actually is. We need to not focus and not make a priority critical race theory when we should be focusing on skills that are going to have our students compete. This country is number 26 in math in the world. Number 1 is China. And yet we're focused on teaching our kids other stuff that is not going to help them compete in private industry. Critical race theory is something that should be taught at home with parents. Parents should be teaching their kids about that. I want our students to be focused on the importance of STEM, technical trades. But I think we also need to focus and revamp our schools where kids are put on a track almost similar to the European model that's successful, that you've probably are familiar with, Thaddeus, over in Germany, where they're on a track because why waste your kids' time in certain classes? They're not getting anything out of it. But if you have a student who is more interested in auto mechanics, or some of the trades, let's go down that track for them. The other thing that we need to be teaching our kids in school is financial management. Our kids need to learn. Our kids need to learn about budgeting, building a budget, financial management as well. So those are some of the ideas. And by the way, I talk about a task force. Right after I am elected, I'll be putting together a task force with parents, teachers, private industry, also students. I want students who are in their last year of school or just finished school to sit on this task force and tell us, because the students are really the customers, is how I look at them. We're there to serve them. Tell us what we did right. Tell us what we did wrong, whether it's a private school or a public school. I want to know what we can do better. We should constantly be trying to get better and better and better. It's kind of like the old TQM stuff that we had in the Air Force, Total Quality Management. You're always looking to improve. And that task force is going to be critical because we're going to be looking at revamping the curriculum here. We're going to be looking at best practices across the country to see what works. And why can't we use that here? I don't care if it's a Democrat idea or a Republican idea. It doesn't matter to me. If it's a great idea and it's working somewhere else, we're going to try it here in New Mexico.
Mm-hmm. Definitely say as an entrepreneur,
so
that's the counting and business in school definitely is something that should be taught. Definitely would have kept me out of the hole. And I could probably already be running a full-time business if it wasn't for that.
Well, bring in like Financial Peace University from like Dave Ramsey or something, or I don't know, bring something in, right? I Monopoly, teach Monopoly or something. Because the financial literacy I think is our second or third killer when it comes to like people understanding their economic potential, understanding economics in general, the policies that they advocate or that they can be fooled into advocating because they do not understand money.
Yeah, and
it's tragic.
And this is where private industry comes into play, because you could have students go into, now you have to work out, the insurance and the risk and all that, but you could have students go learn on the job training and potentially getting a certificate, say in welding. So by the time, they're out of high school, they're pretty familiar because they've been going to, a welding class or some private business doing welding. And then they go to C&M, get a certificate even after 6 months to a year. And these kids at 19, 20 years old can be making over $50,000 a year. But you have to start that early on, I would argue 7th grade, but, probably 9th grade now, into the schools, into high school, where students are picking the tracks. Let the student tell us what he or she wants to do. Hey, I want to go into financial management, or I want to be an engineer, or I want to go into education. Whatever it is, we need to be tailoring our education to the needs of the student. And I don't really think we're seeing that now for 50th in education in the United States.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I guess you're right about the trade schools. And when I grew up in the South, we had trade schools and magnet schools that the high schools fed, or that were high schools dedicated to one thing. I don't understand where that went. I don't really see it here. I mean, there's some institutions here in the state that actually kind of specialize in that stuff, but you have to seek those out. Like the existing school systems don't seek that out. I mean, I know in the Los Lunas School District, I mean, there's just something like that simply doesn't exist unless you are in a tremendous amount of trouble and you go to a school for the troubled youth who can't quite conform to public education and who we graduate and actually who we actually, somewhat move into jobs. But you shouldn't have to, screw up in high school to go to some, collection of schools that, aren't necessarily are for the delinquents, where you are actually then taught something and then you can actually go and get a job afterward. I don't like this push for universal university education. And you're right. I want the trades back.
Yeah, you don't have to go to college, to do well in the United States. I mean, there's so many other jobs that you can do by going to a trade school or getting a certificate, whether it's, cyber is huge right now. I think cyber is a great thing that we should be starting in junior high in this country, because we're getting just kicked in the butt when it comes to cyber by China and other countries. I mean, we really got to start developing these skills to compete in the 21st century. One of the issues here in New Mexico, as you know, it's so diverse because you have rural versus urban. It's going to be a challenge to get those rural students where they need to be. And that's something that we're going to have to look at. It's a lot easier. It's a lot more choices here in the Albuquerque area or Santa Fe or Las Cruces. But, we got to make sure that we're not forgetting our rural schools, because, we want them to be successful as well.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, hey, man, I guess we're getting close to your time, man. If we want to give you your closing pitch here to us, you've definitely gone into a lot of detail about what you want to do to help New Mexico rise and stuff like that. But just close us out here, man. If you have anything else Oh, can you ask one more question, Nick?
Just
You
one
want
more.
to ask one more question, Nick?
Sure.
Yeah,
Just go for it,
absolutely.
man.
So I'm a two-way advocate, and you obviously supported the 2A sanctuary city. My question is, do you see constitutional carry ever coming through here in New Mexico, or any time coming up to legislation while you're a governor?
No, I don't. And here's why. Because in 2022, the Senate is not up for re-election, and it's almost a 2-to-1 majority there for the Dems. So I don't see that coming up at all in the next 2 years. I think that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, not in 2 years. Yeah, makes sense.
No, it's not going to happen. But people need to be. I think people are waking up to seeing what this governor has done of infringing and being very intrusive in their lives and with their constitutional rights. And the people have to start holding these elected officials accountable. And this is why one of my other policy initiatives is we need term limits in New Mexico. There's no reason, and especially in Washington, D.C. I mean, I will tell you, we don't need more Mitch McConnells or Nancy Pelosi's. It's just, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me anyway. I'm not an incumbent type of guy. I think you should be going to Washington or Santa Fe to serve and not serve yourself and be a career politician. So term limits are extremely important, and people need to be getting involved at all levels, whether it's making phone calls for candidates or walking door to door and actually educating people on, hey, this is how this particular candidate or this is how the government is affecting you, whether it's Republican or Democrat. People need to start getting, we need to get back to basics here of the roles and responsibilities of government and the roles and responsibilities of a governor. A governor who actually serve the people instead of serving herself. So, that's important to me. So, I am the only candidate for governor that I know of, and I think that's going to end up coming into the race that has the triad of leadership in the military, private industry, and elected office. Those skills and those experiences have really shaped me and helped me in my views, especially going around and talking to thousands of New Mexicans across the state. And I look forward to traveling around the other areas of the state here and hearing their views, because when you're a commander, and Thaddeus, this, and I was a commander, you don't know all the answers. It's the men and women that are doing the job on the front lines. They're the smartest ones out there, and that's symbolic of the people who are living their lives daily, trying to raise their families and trying to support their families, and they're worried about their jobs. Those are really the experts that I want to listen to, instead of having a governor who, seems to know what's best for everybody. What's best for one person in Santa Fe is not best for the other, almost 2.2 million other New Mexicans who are struggling under this regime, and it needs to change.
Agreed.
Well, good luck to you in the. I assume there's a GOP primary that you will have to go through before we get to the election.
There's one other candidate that has announced. So right now we only have 2 Republican candidates, but I would imagine there's some more coming. But again, this is a campaign that has caught a lot of fire around the state, because it's not a campaign about Republicans. It's a campaign about freedom. It's a campaign of making New Mexico first. It's a campaign of listening to the people. This is the people's campaign. This isn't the special interest campaign. And you're going to see a hell of a lot of support and a lot of pushback against the current regime up in Santa Fe.
All right, Jay Block, thanks for joining New Mexico Rising today. And man, it's been a blast. And yeah, you got me somewhat excited for your candidacy, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you for your time. Well,
I
what
like
can I
him.
say?
Anyway,
I liked his answers.
So, nah, man.
He answered, and he gave good explanation. So educating our
No,
populace, I think,
it's
is a key.
I mean, I think everyone, in light of my rant at the beginning of the show, knows that, like, yeah, education, number 1, 2, and 3, and then followed by like jobs and crime. And as many of the people who have come on over the last couple of weeks said, like, the education, if not top notch, I mean, it leads to not being qualified for jobs, which leads to poverty, which inevitably leads to crime. And so, yeah, I mean, to have I'm sensing the theme from people who are trying to run for office or people who are just trying to make New Mexico a better place. It is education, and I think school boards getting summarily suspended is indicative of like things aren't good. So, other than that, give everybody shill a little bit for us, man. Where can we find you?
You can find me on YouTube or on Twitter, but I mean, mainly YouTube because Twitter is kind of let's not even talk about
Dumpster fire.
But yeah, you can find me on YouTube at A New Mexican. The channel's name is A New Mexican. And yet again, like I said, I'm a guy giving my side of my opinion based off the facts and evidence that I have seen. Yet I'm a guy who's also willing to change his mind. So if you're going to come at me saying something I said is wrong, just give me some facts and evidence to help support your case. And I have no problem admitting that, hey, new evidence, or I didn't see this evidence or these facts, and changing my mind. Because like, I don't know, you might know who this quote comes from, but the educated populace is a free populace. So like, I'm a huge fan of that education and just looking at everything, facts, logics, just that's all we can hope for. And that's all my channel is hoping for, is that we can help wake people up to thinking for themselves and not just what the mainstream media or the governor or the politicians are telling you to think. We want you to think for yourself.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it, man. And actually go to A New Mexican on YouTube, man. Give him some subscriber love so he can create a custom URL, and same with us. So with that said, thanks again, Nick. Thanks again, JC Block, for coming on New Mexico Rising. And that, I think, is a show. If you could, producer Chris, take us out. See you next week, guys.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Please tune in next week. Next Sunday, we'll have Professor David Clements from NMSU coming on to talk about a range of interesting topics, I'm sure. So we'll look forward to that. We'll see you guys later.
Today on New Mexico